Okay, this position on the board is a chess ending of the game of Bobby Fischer with white against Taimanov. It was played in 1971 in Vancouver, Canada. And if we look at the position, we can see that the material is equal. They both have a light piece and they both have 6 pawns. But there are some interesting things that we can look at, and one of them is that there are pawns on both wings, on the king side and on the queen side. And when in an ending there are pawns on both wings, the bishop is stronger than the knight. And that's because the bishop can easily move from one side of the board to another side of the board, easily in a long distance. So he has, let's say, a long range. It's a long range weapon. While the knight can only make smaller steps. So it takes for the knight much longer to move from one side of the board to the other side. So that's why they say if there are pawns on both sides of the board, both of wings, then the bishop is often stronger than the knight. And something also that happens here is that this white bishop is placed on the same color fields as the black pawns. The black pawns here are all on white squares, so the white bishop can attack them easily, and the black knight is bound to defend the pawn on g6. Okay, let's see how this great grandmaster Bobby Fischer wins this position, because it's not that easy, but he finds a beautiful way. His first move is he moves his bishop to b3. Now this looks a bit strange, but in a few moves you will see what the idea behind it is. Black decides to wait by playing his king to a7. The idea of black is to play the king back and forward between b7 and a7, and hoping that way he will be safe. White plays his bishop to d1, king goes back to b7, and now bishop f3 check, and the king doesn't want to go to a7, so he goes to c7 now to be closer to the center. And now the first achievement is here. White has achieved that the black king cannot move anymore, since these two squares are occupied by the bishop, and that means that the black king must stay on c7 to defend the pawn on b6. That's the first achievement. And let's see what happens now. White goes with his king to a6. Now black cannot play his king because he would lose the pawn on b6, so he plays his knight to g8, and maybe has the idea that he can play back and forward this knight, and that nothing will happen. But Fischer goes now with his bishop to d5, attacking the knight. The knight must go to e7 again, and here comes a waiting move. Bishop to c4, knight goes to c6, and then the bishop goes to f7, attacking the pawn on g6. Black still has his knight to defend it. He goes to e7. So it seems like black manages to defend all his pawns. The king can defend the pawn on b6, and the knight can defend the pawn on g6. But now comes an idea that happens often in chess endings, and that's called Zugzwang. Zugzwang is a German word. It means actually that black will not be able to make a move without losing material. And white achieves this by playing his bishop from f7 to e8. So actually it looks like a waiting move, and still both pawns are being attacked. But black has to make a move. He cannot say, I pass, I don't play. No, that's chess. We have to make a move. So black has to give up one of those 2 pawns. If he moves the knight, g6 falls, and if he moves the king, b6 will fall. Taimanov chose to move his king to d8. Smart move, because now the white king cannot take on b6 because the white bishop is hanging. But Bobby Fischer had seen this, and he now makes a very brave decision. He sacrifices his bishop for a lot of pawns. He takes on g6. Black takes the bishop, and then he takes on b6. Now we see that white gets so many pawns for this bishop that he sacrificed. Taimanov went with his king to d7, and c5 was taken. And now black tries to stop those pawns, but he doesn't manage. Knight goes to e7, and white starts marching with his pawns. An exchange here. The knight goes to c8, and then a5. The knight goes to d6. What is this knight doing? This knight wants to, he was here, and he wants to make this walk towards this weak pawn, and then hoping to take this other one. But that takes far too long. Far too long. White played b5, and then came a knight e4 check. King went to b6, and now we see that if black would take on g3 the pawn, this one, then white would win by marching on with his pawn his a pawn. If the king goes there, then a7, and the next move is a8, queening, promoting. So that doesn't help. So we go back to the position after king to b6. Black played king to c8, and white plays his king to c6, making way for his b pawn and his a pawn to march on. And after king d8, b6, in this position Taimanov resigned, because it's impossible to stop those pawns. For example, if black goes to a8, then a6, king b8, a7 check, king a8, b7 check, and black may have this pawn, no problem, because the king goes to c7, and in the next move the pawn will go to b8 and queen, and it's over. So the interesting things about this ending were actually, I'll go to the initial position, is that white could use his bishop to attack the pawn on b6, his king to attack the pawn on b6, and he made use of the idea of Zugzwang. The first achievement was a few moves later in this position, where the white bishop is placed in this diagonal, so the king cannot move any more without losing his pawn. The second achievement was in this position, where still this king must defend the b6 pawn, and the knight must defend the pawn on g6. This is the Zugzwang position. And then the third important moment is this one, where white sacrifices his bishop and gets the pawns that are decisive for winning the game, like that. So that's this beautiful example of an ending between bishop against knight.